might have been seen as problematic by some of the students, maybe even threatening?
I don't see how someone would rationally think it was threatening. I could see how it might challenge their existing ideas, but for me, that's the spirit of the university, is challenging ideas that you already have. And I don't know who this came from. I would be interested to see the original complaint or complaints, because I don't really have any context as to what exactly their problem was.
Sorry, can I, sorry to interrupt, but can I just ask Lindsay to maybe just provide us with a full thing? Mm-hmm. Sorry, Nathan, I don't. Yeah. I just like to hear the whole, what took place. So if you would just give us the whole story, and then sorry, but I just feel that because I'm just sitting in and I.
Yeah. Okay, so we have to teach about grammar, and in the Pearson book there was a section about pronouns and using gendered language. So I wanted to make it more engaging. So what I did is we were talking about in papers using they as a singular. And then we were also talking about his and hers and how to construct sentences with that. And then to contextualize it, I brought up a YouTube debate. So a debate with both sides, Jordan Peterson's sides and this fellow named Nicholas Matt, who's also a prof at U of T.
Okay.
And they.
Do you have the name of the video?
It was from the agenda with Steve Paikin.
Okay.
It was a YouTube debate. It was 1 hour long, but I showed about 5 minutes.
Okay.
And then the students were very interested, I could tell. All of their eyes were on the screen. And after, when we had a debate, there were people of all opinions. And from what I could see, it was a very friendly debate. Obviously, this person who had an issue did not express it to me. They just went straight to whoever. I don't really know what happened. So.
Okay, just for some additional context, so you came from U of T, is that right?
No.
Oh, from
SFU.
From SFU. Okay, so you weren't one of Jordan Peterson's students.
No.
Like that. So just to give you some context about Jordan Peterson, he is a figure that's basically highly involved with the alt-right. The website Rebel Media, which is an alt-right website, has been involved in raising multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars for his research. It's he as close to a week and a half ago, he gave a lecture in which he identified student protesters, by posting their social media accounts so that people would bully and threaten them online. He lectures about basically critiquing feminism, critiquing trans rights.
I'm familiar.
White supremacy.
I follow him.
I'm not critiquing you. Okay, so
the thing is, can you shield people from those ideas? Am I supposed to comfort them and make sure that they are insulated away from this? Is that what the point of this is? Because to me, that is so against what a university is about. So against it. I was not taking sides. I was presenting both arguments.
Okay. So the thing about this is, if you're presenting something like this, you have to think about the kind of teaching climate that you're creating. And these arguments are counter to the Canadian Human Rights Code. Ever since, and I know that you talked about C-16, ever since this passed, it is discriminatory to be targeting someone due to their gender identity or gender expression. So bringing something like that up in class, not critically, and I understand that you're trying to
It was critical. No. I introduced it critically.
How so?
I said, it was in the spirit of debate.
Okay, in the spirit of the debate is slightly different than being okay, this is a problematic idea that we maybe want to unpack.
But that's taking sides.
Yes.
It's taking sides for me to be oh, look at this guy. Everything that comes out of his mouth is BS, but we're going to watch anyway.
Okay. So I understand the position that you're coming from and your positionality, but the reality is that it has created a toxic climate for some of the students.
How many?
It's great that...
Who? How many?
Okay.
One?
May I speak?
I have no concept of like how many people complain, like what their complaint was. You haven't showed me the complaint.
Yes, I understand that this is upsetting, but there's also confidentiality matters.
The number of people is confidential?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is one or multiple students who've come forward saying that this is something that they were concerned about and that it made them uncomfortable. If this is, for example, a trans student, this is basically debating whether or not a trans student should have rights within one of their classes. And that's not something that is really acceptable in the context of the kind of learning environment that we're trying to create. It would be the equivalent of debating whether or not a student of color should have rights or should be allowed to be married. Do you see where, like, how this is not something like that's intellectually neutral, that is kind of up for debate? This is the Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
But it is up for debate.
But, I mean, you're perfectly welcome to your own opinions, but when you're bringing it into the context of the classroom, that can become problematic. And that can become something that creates an unsafe learning environment for students.
But when they leave the university, they're going to be exposed to these ideas. So I don't see how I'm doing a disservice to the class by exposing them to ideas that are really out there. And I'm sorry I'm crying. I'm stressed out because this to me is so wrong. It's so wrong.
Can I mention the gendered violence, gendered and sexual violence policy?
Yeah, please.
So under that, gendered violence doesn't just include sexual violence, but it also includes targeting folks based on gender. So that includes transphobia, biphobia, homophobia. All those sorts of things are protected under the policy, and so those are things that Laurier has upheld as values, as well as the Ontario Human Rights Code. And so those are things that we're responsible for not impacting our students in that way, and not spreading transphobia in that way.
Okay, so what I have a problem with is I didn't target anybody. Who did I target?
Trans folks.
How? By telling them ideas that are really out there? By telling them that? By telling them? Really?
It's not just telling them. In legitimizing this as a valid perspective, as this is another valid perspective.
In a university, all perspectives are valid.
That's not necessarily true, Lindsay.
Well, this is something that's being debated in current society, and I don't feel the need to shield people from what's going on in society. Like,
okay.
To imagine that this is happening in university, it's just bad.
Okay, so just to give you a context, also within all of this that is happening, Laurier's being blanketed with white supremacist posters currently. There's another debate in society, which is whether or not North America should be a set of white nationalist states and that it should be ethnically cleansed of other people. That is also a current debate in society. Would you show something in your tutorial that you had, white supremacists and non-white supremacists debating whether or not other people should live in North America? Is that something that you would show?
If that was related to the content of the week and we were talking about right-wing speech bubbles, maybe. Okay. It depends on the content. Like, I mean, if there's really ideas that are existing out there like that, then, I mean, look, the thing is, like, I don't see what's transphobic about showing a video of Jordan Peterson. He's a real person. He's out there.
He is a real person, but he is a real person who has engaged in targeted behavior that, or targeting of trans students in a particular, like basically doxing them, if you know the term, like giving out their personal information so that they will be attacked, harassed, so that death threats will find them. This is something that he has done to his own students. He has done to other students. And this is also something that the students are aware of. So this is basically like playing, not to kind of do the thing where everything is kind of compared to Hitler, but this is like neutrally playing a speech by Hitler or Milo Yiannopoulos from Gamergate. This is the kind of thing that departmentally, in terms of like critical communication studies and in terms of the course of what we're trying to do, is diametrically opposed to everything that we've been talking about in the lectures. Was this one of the reasons that you wanted to do this? Because it was like a reaction to the lecture content?
No, we were talking about gendered language, and I was asking them to structure sentences using they or using his or her. And then we talked about the societal context of it.
Okay.
So I don't get why I'm being seen as transphobic by virtue, by proxy of me just saying, just stating, just exposing people to an idea. I don't get how that label is not attached to me. I really don't.
It's more about the effect rather than the intention. If that, like, obviously that wasn't your intention, but nevertheless, it disturbed and upset students enough.
So everything's about those students who are disturbed? Everything is catered to them?
Yeah.
Can I just
please,
offer a different perspective? Was this a tutorial based on looking at grammar?
Mm-hmm.
And it was focused on the use of pronouns and the use of grammar.
Mm-hmm.
Is grammar not something that's not really subject to debate?
The they and the his or her, it's a huge debate right now. Can we use they in the singular?
Yeah, but you do know that they has actually been used in the singular.
Yeah, that was in the video I showed to the class, and
Okay.
that's a point I made. And the thing is, what's kind of funny is I disagree with Jordan Peterson. I disagree, but you guys seem to think that I'm like pro Jordan Peterson or something. It's pretty funny.
Well, from the
Do you mind if I? Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm here for a different, like, just as the MA CAS coordinator. My issue with Jordan Peterson, I'm going to come at it from a different angle, is that as an academic and scholar in this institution, or any institution in which my research in that is subject to peer review, right? And you know what peer review is, right? So regardless of what I believe, if I'm to be published in scholarly journals and that, it has to be, my research has to be demonstrated to be able to be reproduced in the methods and theories that are used to reproduce it. I might believe X, but my academic freedom, as I understand it, does not just give me the freedom to spout off. If I'm tenured and they can't fire me, I mean, there was a case of Charles Murray, he used to do this about race at Western, wasn't it Western? Yeah. And he published stuff by publishing companies that didn't do peer review because they wanted what he had. So what he was actually teaching his students were ideas that were not substantiated by methods and theories that could be reproduced in a academic, analytical way that other people could reproduce and get the same results. He had already predetermined the outcome. It's much the way a lot of these right-wing think tanks like the Fraser Institute, that their form of research can't be done in traditional academic journals because they've already predetermined the outcome. For myself, regardless of what I believe, I won't teach anything in any of my classes if it is not something that is substantiated by evidence that can be reproduced according to peer review. I might tell students, I believe X. I have no expectations that they will reproduce anything that I think, because I don't expect them to. But I say, I believe X because of what I've read. But for me, as I teach the students in the second year Comm Studies Theory courses, opinion minus evidence, I know it's a bit simplistic, opinion minus evidence equals prejudice. In the case of Jordan Peterson, and I'm not super well versed, but I have done reading and looking at none of his contentions about the Human Rights Code, the fact that people can be jailed for, you've probably, if you follow him, you would know that he claims you could be jailed when Bill C-16 was being discussed. He was claiming that you could be jailed if you misgendered, like you used the wrong pronoun for someone. What struck me is that none of what he proclaims, and sometimes the way he proclaims it, I think he tries to defend him or act like he doesn't yet know, is done in ways which are academically suspect, to say the least. Like, there is nothing, from what I've read and researched, and which is, again, like I would say, I'm not as extensive on researching him, he does not have the substantial academic evidence to be a credible person. It's like some of the climate change deniers that are given a 50-50 chance with meteorologists. You know, scientists never proclaim 100%, right? Because the scientific method cannot demonstrate, you know, no scientist says this is 100% certain, right? Because that's the nature of scientific inquiry, just like social scientific inquiry. In the same way, though, meteorologists do not teach in first-year geology or meteorological classes that there's a debate, even if in the public sphere there are people that want to believe, and it's a very high number, higher in Alberta than perhaps Ontario, higher in certain parts of the United States, like Texas, who believe that, you know, fossil fuels do not contribute to global warming. But that is not a credible academic, scholarly, scientific position. And I think to present as if there's two sides to a debate when it's substantially there is not an academic credible, that becomes problematic. And I'm approaching this from the point of view of the institution. We are legitimizing positions that don't have credible evidence, just like Charles Murray with his race claims of white superiority. When you're doing that, and I mean, never mind the fact that there's also the issue of the fact that a certain grouping of students will be subject to having their rights subject to what the majority thinks without. So just purely from the matter of it, and what I'm doing is just operating from a different position here in saying that. As a scholar, someone with tutorial leaders, I would find it problematic if my tutorial leaders were representing positions that didn't have any substantial academic credibility to that evidence.
But if he's still a public figure, like, yes, he has an academic credential, but this was on a TV show. He's still a public figure. Like,
he's a public figure, and there's a lot of people there, like Richard Spencer, leader of, I don't like calling them alt-right, it gives them too much legitimacy, but Richard Spencer, right, I mean, the Nazis actually used, this is a historical, issues around the free speech idea in the 1920s in Weimar, Germany, as an issue around which is what they're using now. We know, though, that someone like Richard Spencer is using theories and ideas which don't have any academic credibility. He's a public figure. But in terms of if we introduce someone, we give them greater credibility in a certain condition. Yes, I agree that there are public figures out there that bring people, bring hatred, that target groups. And if you look at, you can look at statistically, the degree of suicide attempts as trans people, young people, it's the highest of any group in society, and you go through indigenous people, right, and so on. I mean, there are things that don't have academic credibility, and I just don't think. I personally think I have some problems. I have no problems with the fact that these things are out there and people are going to engage them, but we have to think of the atmosphere we also create for the learning process, right? Mm-hmm. So that's, anyways, that's...
To go back to your question before, is it just for those people who were upset about this or felt like threatened by this? There's something called the tyranny of the majority. It's that if you want to create an environment that has the ability for everybody to learn, that's not going to block people out just because they are like the minority within a particular group, or they might not feel comfortable like voicing that they have like problems with that material in that space because you're an authority figure in that space. You're also a representative of the class and the department and the school in that space. And this is why it becomes, like, do you understand how it could become an issue? Like, I understand why you made the choice, like that you wanted to kind of present this as an issue, and to talk about and to bring it out there, etc. It's more about trying to understand what the impact of that choice was and why it might not have been the best choice for this context.
I mean, I can see why people would think that.
But
And like, I mean, like I wouldn't do it again. Maybe not this exact case.
But you would do something similar again. Like, just that's your principles that you feel like it would have to be like a completely balanced view. Like,
No, I don't believe in like a false notion of balance, but yeah, I just, like for me, like I'll say it again, like the university is about exposing people to ideas, and I just don't get why you have to think a certain way, or that, because from what I'm getting in this room is if you don't think a certain way, it's not credible. And not about the academic credibility stuff, but from a public figure point of view. And the thing is, like I said, I disagree with what he says, but I'm still open to listening to people. I'm open. And these students were not open. They're not open to learning new things.
okay, so
Hearing other perspectives.
so that the students, your position is that the students were wrong.
I'm not saying they were wrong. I'm saying they
Not
were
open to-
they were not open to a new perspective. And
Okay.
I find that unfortunate.
Okay.
Like, part of university is personal development, and that means becoming like a stronger person and challenging your beliefs and stuff. So
Do you understand how what happened was contrary to? Sorry, Adrian, what was the policy? The kind of the gendered and sexual violence policy. Like, do you understand how?
But sorry, what did I violate in that policy?
So, gender-based violence, transphobia in that policy, causing harm to trans students by framing their identity as invalid or their pronouns as invalid,
Or something up for
potentially
debate?
invalid,
So I caused harm,
which
and
is
violence.
under the Ontario Human Rights Code a protected thing, and also something that Laurier holds as a value.
Okay. So by proxy of me showing you YouTube video, I'm transphobic and I caused harm and violence. So be it. I can't do anything to control that.
Okay, so that's not something that you have an issue with? The fact that that happened? Like,
I mean,
Are you
I
sorry that it
know that
happened?
I know in my heart, and I know I expressed to the class that I'm not transphobic. And if any of them, I don't know, again, I don't know what they said, but I don't think I gave away any kind of political position of mine. I remained very neutral. And
that's kind of the problem, is that if you're framing something that is like this, like just to give you the example of, like in lecture, I also showed something that was from like a member of the alt-right. Were you there for the when I played the Guns Unlimited video talking about
Yeah.
the 3D printing, etc.? So this is someone who also has like a site like the ones that fund Jordan Peterson, like Patreon, like the kind of the alt-right white supremacist website that basically that gets funding for these projects if they get kicked off of things like Indiegogo, etc. But I framed it by saying those kinds of things, by actually bringing out the critical perspective, to just present information like this neutrally. It can help cultivate an environment where these kinds of opinions, like alt-right opinions, white supremacist opinions, anti-trans opinions, anti-gay opinions, anti-women misogynist opinions, where those can feel like it's a space where those kinds of opinions can be nurtured and created. And that's the kind of the frame on why some kinds of content we would use in class and some we wouldn't use, or we would only use those for upper year classes or grad students. Like, for example, in one of your classes, it might be appropriate to watch a white supremacist like recruitment video, something that Richard Spencer has done, because there's students with more critical faculties that have been exposed to more things, that have had more time to kind of process. These are very young students. And something of that nature is not appropriate to that age of student because they don't have...
18?
Yes.
They're adults.
Yes, but they're very young adults. They don't have the critical toolkit to be able to take it apart yet. This is one of the things that we're teaching them, and so this is why it becomes something that has to be done with a bit more care.
I get what
if
you
it
mean
is
about
presented.
framing it. Like I remember when you talked about the 3D printing of the guns and how you said it was problematic. And like in retrospect, yeah, I should have used that word, problematic. That would have been a good word to frame it.
Well, it's good that you acknowledge that, especially since you're saying that, this is not something that you agree with. This is not something that you're trying to promote. It's just that you're trying to open up the debate. But the problem is that that particular debate is about whether trans people are people or not. Does that make sense?
It's a language issue, and you can extend it to whether you want to extend it to personhood or not. And I did present that argument. I did present the argument that by denying people their pronouns, you are denying their dignity.
Mm-hmm.
I stated that argument.
Okay. But do you understand if you were a trans person in that class, or if the topic was, if women should have the vote, do you think that you might find that problematic? Do you think that might not be something that was just kind of academically related to your identity and rights, but something that was fundamentally related to your identity and rights?
Sorry, what's the question again?
That if you were a trans person in that class, do you think that might not have just been like an academic question that was something that was up for debate, but rather that was something that you immediately felt impacted you and made the learning institution that you are paying to attend a place where you're feeling that your identity is being questioned and up for debate?
Would I feel that way if I was a trans person? I mean, it's kind of hard for me to say because it kind of ties into like who people are as individuals and how strong they are and how willing they are to engage with ideas. Like,
okay, so
I don't know if I can make any generalization about.
Is your position that these students were not strong enough to be able to withstand this kind of critique?
I mean, if someone was attacking women in front of me, which it does happen, I feel strong enough in my position to be able to either not respond and just know in my head, yeah, that person is wrong. I'm fine with being a female.
Okay.
But I don't know how other people might react. Like I don't live in their head. It's hard for me to know.
Okay. All right. That makes sense.
One of the things, I mean, again, what I see is I have not a problem with the idea of debate at any point. What concerns me with what I know of, having been here now 16 years, and I don't know, the first years have changed in me. This is a first year class, right?
Yeah.
CS 101. But what I have found is that one of the things is a notion of confirmation bias. You've heard that phrase? Mm-hmm. Because you did a comp studies at SFU. But one of the things is that a lot of the students that are coming in already hold very strong opinions, whether or not these are opinions backed up with evidence. And my concern, I'm just adopting the position of the scholar in the situation here, is to say, well, we have these students that come in, they have very strong, in my experience, they've always have, and I'm teaching them in second year even, they have very strong opinions about X, Y, and Z, which is, that's fine. But if they're going to be challenged about those opinions, it's a much greater deal to do that. It's the world that Jordan Peterson, Ezra Levant, Rebel Media, and that have constructed, I find quite in quite amusing in a way, or bemusing, because it's almost like the left has won and controls everything, and you're going to be imprisoned if you don't adopt cultural Marxism, politically correct, the new term cultural Marxism. I mean, I find it practically ludicrous that this is the case, given the political economic realities of Canada, Ontario, Kitchener-Waterloo, this institution, precarious work, etc. So I just find it ludicrous that people like Ezra Levant and Jordan Peterson believe that, I mean, maybe they believe in those black helicopters that the conspiracy theorists in the States used to talk about coming to control world government. Okay. That, to me, is where a lot of that sort of thinking goes. I do know that there's people that bring in those ideas in the classes I teach. I don't feel that I'm doing my duty to challenge these already established ideas if what I present in the courses I teach, and also in terms of the curriculum that communication studies as a field, as an interdiscipline of many disciplines, I don't feel I'm teaching critical engagement in a world where all the established dominant institutions of society reinforce a number of different types of privileges, perspectives, and prejudices, where the university is one of the few spaces where we can actually take people, engage them, challenge them. It's not, challenging the faith-based or family and other types of structures in society that they've been inculcated with for years and years in 3 hours or 1 hour or 50 minutes, in some ways isn't going to be much of a challenge. But if in an institution which prides itself on getting to grips and having peer-reviewed, academically, socially, scientifically, evidence-based research is going to work to confirm the kind of biases that are based on stuff that it cannot be substantiated in an academic, credible way, I find that problematic. And I don't feel we're doing our job as an institution, simply because we're presenting both sides. And again, I'll use the analogy of climate change. I mean, the fossil fuel industry itself knew this in the 1970s. It's like the tobacco companies with lung cancer. As early as the late 1920s, they had a really strong idea that this was happening. Further and further research showed that. I would find it problematic given the degree of advertising and power that the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers, the big tobacco lobby, big pharma, etc., have through advertising, through the media that you've studied at SFU, that you're part of the learning process for students, to just reinforce the kind of prejudices that students bring to class. That to me is something, yes, we need to challenge them, and we need to challenge them, and I challenge them with ideas that I don't even necessarily believe in 203, but because they're substantiated and my colleagues require me to teach them to prepare students better for third and fourth year, I'm happy to teach those things. I know I hope it'll make every student, but maybe some, rethink what they think. If they come around to, they can believe what they can say what they believe, right? Everyone's entitled to their opinions. But we have a duty as educators, as scholars, as academics, even as public intellectuals, to make sure that we're not furthering the kind of, I would call it charlatanism. I think Jordan Peterson, and I know you're not a fan, but I think he actually shows a form of charlatanism when it comes to the academy. And he's playing this whole idea about free speech and a public debate, which is not substantiated by the fact that he has nothing really that is credible in terms of the research, including his stuff on pronouns. And for me, that's where I find people like Jordan Peterson problematic, is because I don't find anything credible in his academic research to be there. I mean, there are other people who teach grammar that could be drawn upon to perhaps challenge this idea of using they around the notion of when you use it. But again, I would say that's, it strikes me as a little bit different bringing in a debate on a YouTube video about something when we're teaching grammar and talking about pronouns.
This kind of brings me back to the next point, which was kind of thinking about how to move forward. Because I can see why you made that choice. Like the topic was grammar, but your role as TA is not really to be teaching about the politics of grammar. It's to be teaching grammar, to be teaching punctuation, to be kind of to be going through these things, like to add clarification or discussion in relation to the lecture material, but not to be bringing original content around side issues. Does that make sense? Like, has this been your kind of structure throughout, was to bring in more like theoretical aspects around like things like spelling, punctuation, like the other topics, like how to write a thesis statement? Or was this like this one class?
It was just this class. I just wanted them to see how they interact with grammar on an everyday, like in everyday life.
Okay.
That was the way that I framed it. Okay. And I remembered my slide. It said like issues in grammar. Okay. And then we talked about English having gendered pronouns, and like it engaged them, like, and people were of all opinion. So.
Okay. Would you be comfortable for the rest of the term to just kind of stick more to a more kind of traditional syllabus of teaching the issues around grammar, but just like the particular like sentence structure, whatever the topics are that we have left?
Mm-hmm. Okay. I mean, I can't repress my personality, but I mean, I don't see where the occasion would arise for me to bring in another controversial topic.
Okay. So just kind of thinking forward, just because of what seems to have been like a little bit of a breakdown in communication, just about like what the requirements for the class are. Do you write out your lesson plans? Or do you do slides?
I write them out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could you send me your lesson plans before your classes, just so I can kind of have a quick look over them?
I write them like on paper with pen, but I can take a picture.
Okay. Yeah.
But sometimes I don't decide until because we get out of the lecture at 5:50. I have till 8 p.m. to decide what I'm going to do based on what you've done.
Okay.
So I mean, I can send it to you literally 2 minutes before I start, maybe.
Okay. Well, if you can plan, like what we're doing in lecture should be maybe 15 minutes tops of the tutorial. The tutorial should focus on the skill building. So I'm assuming that most of that was planned out more in advance. Like if you have a lesson on sentence structure or something.
Today I got them to email me their grammar questions. I'm just going to answer them.
Okay. All right. But going forward, if you can maybe try to plan a little further ahead, and then maybe being like, and then I'm going to talk about the lecture, that's fine. But send those to me in advance just so I can take a look at them, and if you have any PowerPoint slides, etc. I'll ask you not to play any more Jordan Peterson videos or anything of the like. If you did have something that you wanted to play in class, to kind of let me know ahead of time what it is, so I can take a look. And then I'll also talk everything over with my colleagues and with Peter, who's the chair of the undergraduate department. And then we'll talk about how to move forward from this. Does that make sense?
Sorry, that's a little bit vague. Could you specify what you mean by moving forward? That's really general.
Okay. Well, we're going to have to talk about what you said, and then hopefully everything can continue and we can continue to have the working relationship that we do. But it's something I have to talk over with my colleagues because, frankly, some of the things that we talked about are a little bit problematic, and we need to process them.
Okay. Do you know when you'll have an answer by?
I do not.
Okay, so, but basically you're telling me like the alternative to me not continuing my TA-ship is it would somehow be terminated? And I'm not sure what the grounds for that would be.
That's not something that is in my control. I'm not your employer. I'm your supervisor. So I have to actually transmit my information to, I have to talk about it with Herbert, I have to talk about it with Peter, who's the chair. I don't know. If I knew what the entire process is, then I would let you know.
What is the process? What committee is this going to? Like, I kind of need to know like where information about me is circulating.
Okay.
And I don't know.
I don't know either. Herbert, do you have...
I would only assume that it would be with Peter.
Because you said you have to talk it over with your colleagues, so I don't know.
Well,
like my colleagues, Herbert, Adria, and Peter.
And Peter's the chair of the department. I don't have any say over your TA-ship in any respect in that sense. But what we have to discuss is, what we discussed here, and discuss that with Peter.
Right now, I would say that this is an informal process. If it got brought to a formal process, which would be somebody makes a formal complaint and wants to go forward with that, then that would look a little bit different, I would say. And then that would be based on either the gender violence policy or the harassment and discrimination policy, and would go through those policies and procedures, which are online and available to you to look at what that would look like. Hopefully, it can be resolved informally. But
that's my hope too.
Yeah.
So I guess that's what Nathan was getting at by moving forward, by his phrase, moving forward, that this is an informal process. I mean, it's the first time I've been involved in this process in 16 years. And so I don't even necessarily know what the process is. But part of the reason why I wanted to hear your story is a complaint or complaints were made. Have to hear, because, there's two sides, right? You need to know.
There's two sides.
And so we needed to know what happened from your perspective. Right?
Sure.
So if you can send me your lesson plans, and I might need to, after talking it over with Peter, I might need to sit in on some of your tutorials, just to kind of assess the space and see how things are going moving forward. Do you have any other questions?
No.
Okay. All right. Thanks for coming in, Lindsay.